one storyteller, and Laura Milkins, who, I don't know, we seem to know people in common. We were at a party the same night, and we never met, but now we have connected, and I'm glad to welcome her to the Odyssey stage. She has a great story for you.
Thank you so much. So, I believe trust creates safety. Not guns, not barbed wire, not walls. Trust. If you open your hand and you get to know your neighbors, you live in a good neighborhood. So I used to live in Miracle Mile area. And one night I was coming home from graduate school. I'm a performance artist, and I was coming home from graduate school. And I was at the intersection of Glen and Oracle, which is much nicer these days. But I was on my bicycle at the stoplight, and I look over, and the gentleman, rather scurrilous gentleman on the corner goes, "You smoke?" And I go, "No. No, I don't want to buy your drugs." No, I didn't say that. But and then he looks me over, and he says, "Can I get your number? I'd like to call you sometime. We could hang out." And I'm like, the light changes, and I'm like, no. So I bicycle through the light, and as I'm going home, I think to myself, I didn't really feel unsafe because I'm in my neighborhood and because I'm on my bicycle. I always feel safe on my bicycle. I feel like, oh, I can go anywhere. I can zoom away as soon as this light changes. I'll be fine. But I didn't walk anymore. I love walking. And I hardly ever walked because it's not a walking town. I don't know if you've noticed all the broken sidewalks and patches of dirt and weird stuff. That's very Tucson. And I thought, would I have felt as safe if I'd been walking, if I'd been standing at that corner and not on my bicycle? And then I had an idea, because I'm a performance artist. I thought, what if I walked my regular route and everyone I come across, just ask them to walk with me and share a story? I'd probably feel a lot safer, and I'd get to know my neighborhood in a different way. I'm also the person who's like at the bus stop talking to the guy, drinking out of the brown bag, and we're sharing recipes. So you have to put it in context. So I had this idea. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do this. So I talked to my mentor, Guillermo Gomez Peña, who's a wonderful performance artist. And he's like, I love it. I love it. Ay, Laura, you have to do this in Ciudad de Mexico. You have to go to Mexico City. It's the largest city in the world. They say Tokyo is, but if you go to the door at Tokyo and you say, how many people live here? They say 2. If you go to the door in Mexico and you say, how many people live here? They say, why do you need to know? It's the biggest city in the world. So I decided to go to this city of 42 million people and walk across it in the company of strangers and their stories, and to only walk if someone would walk with me and share a story. So I get a grant, and I go down to Mexico, and I dress all in white because I think I'm a blank slate that way for stories. People can share their stories on the blankness of me. I'm also a giant, so I just stand out on the street, and I say, hola, buenos dias, me ayuda, anda conmigo un ratito. Can you just go with me a little ways? I mean, a block, a few blocks, and tell me a story. And a lot of people say no. A lot of people pretend they don't see me. And some people walked with me. Everything from filmmakers to the garbage collector in his little orange jumpsuit. And he was one of my favorite stories because he told me about picking pickled cucumbers in Michigan, probably in my county. And you never know who you're going to meet when you just talk to strangers out on the street. So I want to tell you about my last storyteller. I had exactly 60 people walk with me across La Avenida de los Insurgentes, which is apparently, according to Mexico, the longest avenue in the world. And I started near my house, and every day I would walk a little bit. And at this point, most of it is really crowded. There's lots of buses and people and a subway line that goes through. But I got to a stretch of road, and it was a little desolate, and no one really was going by. So I'm feeling a tiny bit desperate as an hour goes by and another hours go by. And then I see somebody walking along, and they do the I don't see you. And I think, I'm like, hola, hola. Okay, they do not want to walk with me, and they do not want to talk with me, and that's fine. So I'm waiting, and another hour goes by. I'm thinking, well, I'll just be back here tomorrow doing the same thing. It'll be fine. And then I see this guy, and he's got a little backpack on the front of him, and his head is down, and he's going, I think, well, I got to try. Like, hola. And he stops. He says, yes. And I say, can you help me? He goes, I'm on my way to my lawyer's. I'm like, just a little bit. Can you just walk with me a block? It would really help me. I'm doing this project. And he says, okay, just a block. Few minutes. He walks with me for 3 hours. He tells me the story of his divorce and the loss of his job. He was on his way to his lawyer's to get a divorce that he doesn't want. So as we're walking along, he tells me that he worked for the riot police for a number of years with the big shield. And he tells me, this is a very dangerous city. I've seen the worst. And I said, but I'm safe. I'm with you. He says, yeah. But be careful out there. And then we get a little ways on, and he says, this is a very dangerous place, by the way, as he tells me stories of, crazy things that he saw as a police officer. And I said, yeah, but you're with me. He said, yeah. And then we go along a little farther, and we get to, he tells me, you can't go to Mexico without seeing the Virgin of Guadalupe. He says, the basilica is just down this way. And I look off to the side of the road. So far, I had at no point left the main avenue on the entire journey. And I look down this rabbit warren of streets, and I think, should I trust this guy who's been telling me how dangerous Mexico City is and walk down this alley with him? Yes, of course. So I walk with him, and as I'm going, I see they're selling all these little tchotchkes. Clearly, we're on our way to the basilica. It's going to be fine. So we get up on top of the hill, and there's this weird sort of batwing modern building that's the basilica. And he stops me and he says, I want to tell you the story of San Juan Diego. This is a very important message for Mexico. This is our most important sacred place. He tells me that San Juan was walking up this hill back in the 1500s, and he was a humble Aztec man, not anybody important. And the Virgin Mary appears to him. And she says, I want you to build a church here. And I think, ooh, this is good. I can't remember if I'd heard this story before or not, but I was excited. And then he says, so he went to the archbishop, this humble man. He says, the Virgin Mary appeared to me and wants me to build a church on this hill. And the archbishop says, yeah, no. And he says, okay. So he goes up back home, and he's walking around and goes up the hill again, and the Virgin Mary appears to him again. And she says, I need you to build a church on this hill. He says, I know, I asked the archbishop. She said, well, ask the archbishop again. And he goes to the archbishop and says, the Virgin Mary came to me again and told me to build a church on this hill. And the archbishop says, bring me proof. Now, at this point, my friend is very excited. We're looking out over the city in Mexico, and he says, so he goes up the hill again, and he doesn't see her. And I'm like, okay. And he says, so he takes a different route the next day, and he goes up the hill, and he sees the Virgin Mary. She appears to him, and she says, you need to build, he's like, I know, I need to build a church on this hill. I've asked the archbishop, and he says, to show some proof. And she says, go to the top of the hill and collect the flowers there. Anyway, it's the Virgin Mary. So he says, okay. So he goes to the top of the hill. There shouldn't be flowers. It's not the season of flowers. And there are flowers. And he takes his tunic and he collects the flowers. My friend did this. He kind of kneels down. He says, he collects the flowers. And he takes them down the hill, and he takes them to the archbishop and says, I've collected these flowers because the Virgin Mary asked me to. And he drops his tunic, and on the front of his tunic is the Virgin of Guadalupe with the rays of light out of it. And my friend says, oh, I just got chills. And I say, I just got chills. And he says, now we need to go see the Virgin of Guadalupe. I said, yes, definitely. So we go into the church, and it's Mass. Mass is happening. So we go down below, and it's very strange. You go down below the church, and up above is the Virgin Mary, and there's a people mover. And people are taking pictures of the Virgin Mary. Mass is happening up here. And I go across, and I take my pictures. I'm excited. And then we go back across, and we take pictures. This is the tunic. This is the miracle. That picture up on the wall is what appeared to Juan Diego and the Archbishop in 1500, or so says the story. And after we finished that, my friend and I walked to the end of my route. It's the last subway stop on the Avenida de Insurgentes, and it's the end of the avenue. And when we get there, he takes my hand and he holds it. And he says, thank you so much for today. I really needed this. I was having a terrible day, and I was so sad. And you came along, and we got to see a miracle together. And I said, oh, thank you so much for being my last walker. Thanks for showing me the most iconic, beautiful, Mexican thing that you could possibly see, the Virgin of Guadalupe. Thank you so much for walking with me. And he says, if you need to go anywhere in this city, just call me. I'll protect you. I said, thank you so much. And all I could think of afterward was, all we need to do is extend our hand in trust to our friends and to our southern neighbors, and we would all live in a different world. Thank you.